Welcome to the dark. I collect stories people don't want to tell. Some are real. Some should have stayed hidden.
Imagine walking into your son's room and finding a toy you never bought. A small, slightly dirty stuffed rabbit with button eyes and a blue bow tie, sitting perfectly still on the edge of the bed. Ethan called it a gift. He said it came from his new friend, Mr. Hollow, who lived in the woods behind the house. At first, it sounded like the typical story of a childhood imaginary friend. Then more gifts arrived. A hand-carved wooden soldier, an antique doll with a yellowed lace dress. Finally, a music box shaped like a carousel, carrying a manufacturer's stamp from 1954. All of them were decades old, yet they appeared in Ethan's room as if they had just been pulled from a shelf. Ethan said he met his friend at the playground, but the only playground that ever stood in those woods burned to the ground 40 years ago. It was a local tragedy that had been erased from the maps before Ethan was even born. At 2:17 a.m., the house changed. 3 slow taps echoed through Ethan's bedroom. The sound came from the window, but the vibration was on the inside of the glass. When his father rushed in, Ethan sat bolt upright in his sleep and whispered that Mr. Hollow thought he was being rude. In that moment, the room went cold. Every toy on the dresser, the rabbit, the soldier, the doll, snapped their heads around in a single fluid motion to face the father. The privacy of the home had vanished. The toys were no longer just playthings. They were an audience, watching and listening from inside the child's own bedroom. The very next morning, the rabbit disappeared, only to reappear in the attic, sitting beside an old black and white photograph that shouldn't have existed. The photo was dated 1963. It showed dozens of children at the old playground, their faces twisted in a desperate attempt not to scream. Standing behind them was a tall man in a black suit. On the back, a list of names featured one scratched-out name that was still legible: Ethan Parker. The warning then became a physical presence. A wooden figure of the man in the black suit appeared on the kitchen counter, its base carved with the words, "One more child needed." In a sudden panic, the father smashed the carving with a hammer and set the splinters on fire. He watched the wood turn to black ash in the bottom of a metal can, certain he had completely destroyed the link. But the next evening, the figure was back on the counter, perfectly restored as if the fire had never happened. Next to it sat a tiny wooden house with a final message: "Welcome home, Ethan." The father was fighting something that existed beyond the reach of physical consequence. You cannot break or burn an entity that refuses to acknowledge the damage you do to it. At 2:17 a.m., the music box began to play its distorted melody. The father found his son's bed empty and the window thrown wide to the night air. Dozens of small footprints led away from the house and into the trees. As he followed them, the forest itself seemed to warp, the trunks growing thicker and the air turning unnaturally cold. The dark trail ended at the impossible. The old playground was back, glowing under the light of hundreds of floating lanterns. It was teeming with children, their laughter echoing through the trees. The strange crowd was a living timeline. Some children wore modern hoodies, while others wore the heavy wool of the 1930s or the pressed collars of the 1950s. Despite the gap in years, not one of them had aged a day. The playground functioned as a dark preservation. Mr. Hollow had pulled these children out of their own lives, keeping them exactly as they were, while the rest of the world moved on without them. The father found Ethan holding the tall man's hand. When Mr. Hollow tipped his hat, the playground fell into a sudden, suffocating silence, as every child stopped playing to watch the confrontation. When the father tried to pull Ethan away, Mr. Hollow remained polite. He explained that leaving wasn't his decision to make, it was up to a vote from the other children. The forest responded to the threat of escape. The ancient trees uprooted themselves, their heavy trunks dragging through the mud as they shifted into a solid wooden wall, closing every exit from the playground. Beside them stood a rotting sign from 1891, labeling the area a sanctuary. Ethan squeezed his father's hand, whispering that the other children weren't holding him there because they were mean. They were holding him there because they were afraid. Ethan wasn't pointing at the tall man or the walking trees. He was pointing toward the pitch-black horizon beyond the playground's lights. High above the tree line, a massive section of the darkness shifted. One giant eye, the size of a hill, opened and stared down at the children. For the first time, even Mr. Hollow looked small. Ethan whispered that this was the thing they were being hidden from. Mr. Hollow wasn't the predator. He was the warden. The playground was a shield, and the abduction was a rescue mission to keep the children hidden.